Good afternoon, Ohio State fans. Patrick Murphy here with Steve Hellwagon from Bucknuts and 247 Sports. We're at the Big House after Ohio State's 42-27 loss to Michigan. Steve, you and I have done this, I think, 5 or 6 years after these games. We've done some losses, not many. We have not done one after a Michigan game. It's been since 2011, as I'm sure everyone knows. Give me your initial take. You've covered a lot of these. You've covered wins, you've covered losses. Give me your initial take on this game and what you saw out there today, and then we'll get into some of the more specifics.
Well, yeah, Pat, I think it was obviously a much different game than what we've seen out of Ohio State all season long. It kind of had some shades of the Oregon game with the inability of the defense to get stops and to stop the running game by Michigan. 42-27, the final score. It just, I guess the things that I come away from here thinking about are you give up 297 yards rushing. That's the first thing, and 6 touchdowns on the ground. Michigan really didn't even make much of an effort to try and throw the football because they didn't have to, because they were picking up yards in 6 and 8 yard clumps, and then sometimes in 55-yard clumps when Blake Corum broke through the middle. And this was a game that Ohio State could never really grab a hold of.
Sure.
They had opportunities. There were some really bad play calling situations in this game. 2nd and goal at the 3-yard line. They throw a pass to Chris Olave when they had run the football all the way down the field, down Michigan's throat, and they end up having to settle for a field goal there. So that's 4 points. Right before halftime, it was 2nd and 10 at the 20 with about 40 seconds to go, and they ran a direct snap to Travion Henderson. And they just, for whatever reason, their play calling was just a mess today. They were running the ball on 2nd and 3rd and long, which made no sense at all. And that was an example right there. Maybe they thought they were going to catch them off guard. The end around with Garrett Wilson was huge against Purdue. And then they faked it for a touchdown pass down the field to Olave the following week against Michigan State. We never saw it one time today. So I just spent 90 seconds talking about the play calling, and the offense did put up 27 points, was in position probably to score another 8 to 12 points, maybe, give or take. Could have been in the 40s, reasonably on offense, I think. Give Michigan's defense a little bit of credit. But again, my number one thing coming away from this game is you gave up 297 yards rushing to Michigan, and it doesn't make any sense. Last week you stopped Michigan State cold, and they've got one of the best running backs in the country, supposedly, with Walker. And today, Haskins, who's a 1,000-yard rusher, and Corum just ran all over him all day long. And I think you're back to the drawing board on defense, both in terms of scheme, in terms of who your coaches are going to be in 2022.
Yeah.
And I think you got to have some major personnel upgrades across the board on defense going into 2022. I would say all jobs are open. I don't think anybody's a sacred cow on this team other than maybe Denzel Burke. And he had just a really rough day today, gave up a big play or two, pass interference call on him as well. So I think you're back to the drawing board on defense. And I think it's to the point where I think Ryan Day has to blow it up and hire probably 3 or 4 new defensive coaches and come up with a scheme that's going to work in the Big Ten that's going to stop the run first and foremost, because if you can't stop the run in a as Urban and Ryan Day, a talent equated game, as they like to say, a nut cruncher, then you're never going to win any of those. And that's exactly what happened here today. They got exposed in many ways, shape, and form. Nobody else they played all season could do it, as you stop and think about it. And on a day, I go back to Drew Brees. He had a great career at Purdue, but they went up to Michigan State late in one of his seasons, and Michigan State was terrible that year, 99, 2000, 2001, whichever year it was. And they couldn't throw the football that day because the weather was terrible. It was a great equalizer. And here Purdue had the best team in the Big Ten, and they didn't win the Big Ten outright because of that. loss at Michigan State that game 20 years ago. I remember that. Well, today, this is what it looked like. You weren't going to throw for 500 yards today in these conditions, although he almost threw for 400. But it did create some issues. Penalties, holding, false starts, unforced errors.
Yeah, and things we've seen all year.
So I just spoke for 5 minutes about my initial thought, but I come away from this thinking the defense needs a total and complete reboot, because you are not going to win at the highest level of college football with what we just saw on defense from Ohio State. It's not possible, and all jobs are open. I think he's got to make some very, very tough decisions here in the next couple of weeks.
And I think what's probably most frustrating to Buckeye fans is you come off that game last year against Alabama, and they talked about making defensive changes. They didn't make staff changes necessarily, but it was scheme, and it was, we were going to be able to practice. And then you come into this year, and it's the same stuff. And then you lose the game to Oregon. They do make some tactical changes in terms of how they do things on game day and who's calling plays and whatnot. And you still end up in the same place.
Yeah.
And so I agree with you. I mean,
they did go to the 4-2-5 with the bullet linebacker, which today it looked like Craig Young was the bullet and Ronnie Hickman was more playing the two high safety, and they didn't play the cover safety as they had in the past. Now, maybe they did mix in some of that at times, but to me, in a game like this, I saw somebody said, are they still in 5 defensive backs? Because you didn't need to run 5 defensive backs today. What you needed was that rugged third linebacker who was going to hit the ball carrier at the line of scrimmage. Too often, I had this on the binoculars, too often Corum or Haskins were coming through the hole and getting ahead of steam, and they're 4 or 5 yards downfield before anybody touches them.
Yeah.
I mean, huge holes. That's the defensive tackles. They got gashed from the first series of the game, didn't hold the point of attack against the interior defensive line of Michigan. And for years, somebody had a stat. In Harbaugh's 5 years that he's lost to Ohio State had rushed on average for over 750 yards more on total than Michigan had. That's an average of 150 yards a game, roughly, give or take. And today the shoe was on the other foot. The other team ran for about 200 yards more than Ohio State did, and they were able to get the win.
Well, let's talk about Ryan Day, because we could go into each guy, but you know what happened. You saw the game. So Ryan Day, clearly an offensive coach, didn't call his best game today. He's had some of those. I think at times he gets a little quarterback happy. He was a quarterback, but he's not a defensive guy. We know that. And he hasn't hired a guy. He did go get Greg Madison, and that was one thing, but he hasn't hired a guy to run that defense since Greg Madison retired. Kerry Combs obviously wasn't the guy. Now Matt Barnes is doing it, but he's still relatively inexperienced. I mean, does he need to go out and hire almost a defensive head coach? Is that what they need when you have such an offensive-minded head coach?
I think so, and I've said this before, and it definitely bears repeating. The talent on the defensive side of the ball, just the recruiting there has not been up to snuff. Where you get 5 stars on offense, they've settled for way too many 3 stars on defense, and it's come home to roost. And maybe high 3 stars, low 4 stars, whatever. Not enough national top 50, top 100 talent on defense. And they've got to address that. And they did. They got Sawyer and Tuimalau last year, and those guys will pay dividends. Maybe one of them becomes the next Aiden Hutchinson in a couple of years. Playing all these games this year certainly helped their development, because now, maybe one of them has a Joey Bosa sophomore year next year that can really help this team take it to the next level. But there's not enough talent. There's no talent at linebacker. Discernible.
Yeah. Steel Chambers is your best linebacker.
There's no discernible blue chip talent at linebacker.
Yeah.
There's no discernible, you're saying goodbye to Haskell Garrett. He's your one truly outstanding defensive tackle who answers the bell week in and week out. And you got big question marks up the middle on defense. And, you got to develop some players. The next 9 months are critical for this program, or they're going to be sitting here, a year from now after a home loss to Notre Dame or Michigan and scratch their head. What just happened? So to me, I mean, they play Wisconsin in Columbus next year, and you don't think they're going to line up with Malusi and run all over you, or
Right.
whoever their running back's going to be. So, you got to come up with some solutions. They may have to go into the transfer portal and get impact players who will come to Ohio State and start in the front seven next year for this team to be a national championship contender. It's that bad, it appears right now. Of course, we're prone to overreaction, over exaggeration on a game like today, but they just did not have it. First play of the game, Fleming screws up the kickoff, doesn't field it. Looked like maybe the up back got in his way or something. It bounces. They get the ball at the 4-yard line. They fumbled the snap on the first play. It came too early to Stroud. And then 7, 8 false start penalties, holding penalties when you can't have a holding penalty, and so on and so on. And in some ways they beat themselves. In the other ways, though, Michigan just rolled right over them.
Yeah, and Bryson Shaw said some of that when we were talking to him post game. Obviously, he had the big interception that kind of got things going offensively, but that, he gave all the credit to Michigan and how they played and whatnot, but also said Ohio State shot themselves in the foot too many times. Steve, we heard at Big Ten Media Days coming into the year, Aiden Hutchinson talk about they were doing things differently at Michigan. They were taking this game more seriously. He was just talking post-game about how they took it as seriously as Ohio State did all those things. They have beat Ohio drills and everything. Do you think there's anything to Ohio State's won 8 straight? Yes, we know what they do every week or every day, every time they take the field in practice with Michigan stuff. But do you at some point start to take for granted that you've beaten this team so many times and just the motivation factor today was so much on Michigan's side?
Yeah, I think it can wear against you or work against you in that regard. And, you lose to them once every 10 years. That's,
You'll eventually catch up.
It sucks today, obviously, but, on the whole, it's been pretty good. So no reason to jump off of the bridge or anything or give up. But, a little bit of snow is going to fall in everybody's life every once in a while, a little bit of rain. And I saw somebody on here said, go get Gary Patterson. They need a defensive guru, is what they need. And somebody that's got some modern day football real answers to how to stop a power running attack that's also got some remnants of the spread as well. So, because, in this league, you see it all. Purdue throws it all over the lot. And Michigan today ran it. Wisconsin, we know they're going to run it. So you see a little bit of everything, and you've got to be able to adapt and have the personnel, and nothing that Ohio State put out there today was on that side of the ball was acceptable. When you think about to start the second half, and again, they left points on the field in the first half. They left 8 points on the field in the first half. The score at halftime really should have been 21-14 instead of 14-13. Ohio State should have had the lead and the ball, and they come right out and go 3 and out, and another one of the abysmal play calls, the first drive of the second half, it's 3rd and 3. And, you tried to run it. You got 7 yards on the first 2 plays, and now it's 3rd and 3. I think I would have liked a play action and a quick one to Olave or Smith-Njigba or Ruckert to move the chains and then gone from there. Instead, you get slammed for a 2-yard loss because, Michigan is sitting on that play. So 3 really bad play calls, I think, for Ohio State. That one didn't cost them points. They had to punt the ball away deep in their own end. But Michigan took full advantage, moved it right down the field running the ball, moved it right down the field running the ball again. And first 4 possessions of the second half were all Michigan touchdowns, and that's that. So, what are you going to say? It just was not their day.
No.
We could sit here and carry on about how awful it was and how this it was and how that it was. But, the issue, I think, for Ohio State, people are going to say, oh, this cost C.J. Stroud the Heisman or whatever. It really wasn't his Heisman. He hadn't won it yet. He was in position, looked really good, and now his season's over. And if he gets invited to New York, then so be it. It may not happen now. I presume maybe Bryce Young or somebody else is going to win it. That's kind of immaterial. Maybe he'll be in the running for it next year. My feeling on the bowl game,
I was going to ask you what you
They
think next.
obviously aren't going to go to the playoff. The Sugar Bowl is out of the question because it's a contract game with the SEC and the Big 12 supplying teams to play one another in that game. After the playoff field is taken, they put one team from each of those leagues, kind of like the Rose Bowl. They put a Big 10 and a Pac-12 team in there. So my feeling is if Michigan wins the game and hands Wisconsin a fourth loss on the season, which I presume it's going to be Wisconsin, I have no idea what the score is,
Right now.
or Iowa a fourth loss if it turns out to be them, then I would think it would be Ohio State with 2 losses going to the Rose Bowl and Michigan to the playoff. And if the reverse happens, if Wisconsin wins, then probably Michigan gets the Rose Bowl. And Ohio State would then be stuck in one of the 2 other bowls, which would be the Peach Bowl or the Fiesta Bowl. I think that's it. Those are their only options. So I think a Michigan win puts Ohio State in the Rose Bowl. I think a Wisconsin win puts Michigan in the Rose Bowl, or an Iowa win puts Michigan in the Rose Bowl and Ohio State in either the Fiesta or the Peach. I do believe they're still going to be in the New Year's Six somewhere. And I don't have that right. A Wisconsin or Iowa win would put them in the Rose Bowl because they're not going to the playoff.
Right.
And then Michigan would find a spot. Yeah. There's going to be a spot somewhere for Ohio State. I don't think they drop to the Citrus Bowl. So I was trying to think on the top of my head all those, but there's a lot of moving pieces and parts there. I don't think they fall to the Citrus Bowl. Just seems unlikely. I think they'll drop to like 10 probably in the rankings. And, that's where they'll end up. So, I think they're still going to get a New Year's Six Bowl out of it.
Well, we were hoping for Dallas, and does not look good at this point. We're going to wrap up. Steve's already got his recap up. Ryan Day, the video's up. Dave's got his What We Learned for those of you who are VIP members on Bucknuts, and we'll have plenty more tonight. It's a tough one. We all saw it. It's difficult to stomach, I know, for Ohio State fans, but Ohio State falls to Michigan the first time since 2011 in blowout fashion, frankly. I want to thank you guys for tuning in with us. I'm Patrick Murphy. He's Steve Hellwagon. We're with Bucknuts and 247. Please like, subscribe. If you're not a VIP member, I recommend doing it. We have a great deal going on right now, 75% off for an annual membership. We tweeted it. It's on the site if you want to get in on that. It's a great time to do it. Get it for somebody who's a big Buckeye fan for Christmas. That's coming up here. So thanks again for tuning in. We're going to get out of here as soon as we can, but we're going to get some work done. We appreciate everything you guys do for us. We'll talk to you guys soon.